Welcome to another demonstration for the Unitrends System Administration course. In this how-to video tutorial, we're going to look at managing Hyper-V backups. Once again, it really starts in our lab, and we're going to start by logging in through the Chrome browser into our local source Satori user interface. I'm going to log in as my own user account. Right. Once again, here at the top, I have a not protected of 40, and I have a protected now of 6. Those are my agent-based backups that we did earlier. If I highlight on or click on the not protected now, and I move over here to false, and I also filter on my client name within the Hyper-V host, or I look at anything that's running on Hyper-V, here I can see the CentOS target. Right? The CentOS is the target that I'm looking for. That is the Hyper-V guest that we're going to show you how to snapshot today. Once again, I have my target appliance running on the UEB here, running on the same Hyper-V host, and I have my host component. We don't ever need to back up the host component, and you would never schedule backups against another appliance anyways, so I'm not going to schedule backups against these two objects. They will remain false and continue to count on the not protected list. All right, so I'm going to show you how to create a backup for my CentOS Hyper-V virtual guest machine. Now, that guest machine, once again, is running in your Hyper-V environment, right? Back home as well. And in my lab, I can show you here, by logging into my Hyper-V host, that this host, if you go to the Hyper-V manager, and you go to your Windows guest, now this is a Linux guest, so it's not going to work, but I'll show you the motions. You want to connect to this guest, and under your Windows guest, under the actions, you want to insert the Integration Services Setup Disk. Make sure you insert the Integration Services Setup Disk, and you run through the Integration Services Setup. If you want your machine to not have any downtime when it runs through the snapshots, make sure you run through that Integration Services Setup, so that will show up inside of your services here for that machine. If you go to that virtual machine that you're snapshotting through Hyper-V and you go to the services, you'll see the integrated services show up as an actual service inside of that machine as well too. Now for Linux, I'd mentioned that this process doesn't work, when you go to connect and you go to insert the Integration Services Setup Disk here. For Linux, that won't work because you do have to download the latest version of Linux's integration services and manually install that through Linux as well too. And there's a lot of other benefits besides just backups for installing the integration services. SCSI controllers, disk controllers, better performance, properly shutting down and sending those signals to properly shut down and start through the sessions here as well too. Kind of like the VMware tools when you deal with VMware. It's the same thing for Hyper-V. It's the integration services. You can install that for Linux and for Windows, and it's really important to make sure you have those installed so your downtime is minimized during the backup process. And that'll keep the machine from having any downtime when you run a virtual snapshot against it. Now, we're going to go ahead and go into the jobs here, and we're going to go ahead and create a backup job. And this time, what do we want to back up? We're going to make sure we change this to our Hyper-V assets. Now, once again, if you're running Hyper-V, you're running clusters, you'd see all of your hosts and all of your guests. You can put these in groups, even if they're on different hosts. You just have to remember when you move them around. So we can see our asset listed here in our job inventory settings. You'll notice that for Hyper-V, there is no edit settings. You can't do any exclusions or any inclusions for this machine at all. We just want to go ahead and go to the next screen. Now, there is the auto-include new VMs down here. We mentioned that in the presentation module for this section as well, too, for Hyper-V backups. Now, very dangerous if you use this. If you create test machines and you do cloning and testing, you really don't want to use this setting because it is dangerous. It can affect your retention if all of a sudden you're picking up these test VMs and you really don't want backups for them. Now, this is really for clustering where maybe you don't do a lot of testing and you always put machines into production or you move them around. then this becomes handy because if you move a machine from one host to another, it's going to pick it up in the schedule based on these machines, these hosts. Okay, so that auto-include can come in handy, but it's also very dangerous to use. So use that in the appropriate situations when you need to. We're going to go here to the next screen, and here's where I like to start naming these. And once again, this isn't an agent-based backup. This is a direct Hyper-V snapshot. So we can just call it a Hyper-V backup in here, right? And once again, I'm using my Excel sheet to kind of look at how I'm backing up this machine. So if you have your Excel sheet opened up, you look at your installation checklist in here, and you go down to your list here, right? You go down your list here, and you look at, I didn't save that from before, but if you look down your list here, and you find your Hyper-V CentOS asset, you can see that it's on a Hyper-V 24-hour incremental forever schedule, right? You can see that asset right here. Now, in the schedule details, if you look for that exact schedule name, if you look down under the Hyper-V 24-hour incremental schedule, it's going to run Hyper-V incremental snapshots forever, only on the weekdays at 1 a.m. It's just once a day, every 24 hours a day, right? So that installation checklist, that sorting out your cattle, pets, and people can kind of help you organize this installation process as well, too. So once again, we're just going to call this our Hyper-V 24-hour weekday incremental forever. All right, we're going to use the incremental forever backup strategy here. Okay, and you'll now want to choose the days of the week you're going to run this. We can leave the date today because it's already past 3 a.m. today. We want to set this for 1 a.m., and it's going to start tomorrow at 1 a.m. for us, okay, or tonight at 1 a.m. Make sure you set your backup target. Physical appliances, you may have only one in here. Virtual appliances, you can add and create multiples. Check your configuration. In most cases, you're going to leave it to the internal, the default. Once again, you could turn on backups. This is the inline verification backup through the VSS, through the agent, through the snapshots of Hyper-V. We are doing integrity checks on these virtual machines for you. If we see any integrity issues, we let you know through the backup failure and warning messages. You will want to keep these job results and the job failures in both of their reports in most cases, but you can turn those off. All right, so we're going to go ahead and save this job for ourselves here. And now in our job manager, we can see a new job here for our Hyper-V clients and assets, right? Our Hyper-V guests and assets. We can see that it's scheduled to start here at 1 o'clock tonight, after hours, after everybody's gone. We can wait till 1 o'clock, or we can go ahead and kick this group off as well. You'll see the status go into running. Then you can go over to your active jobs, and you can see that active job hit the queue. If you view the details of it, you can see the host that it's backing up from. You can see the application type of backup it is. It's a Hyper-V snapshot off of this Win Hyper-V host for this asset, this guest. All right, we'll go ahead and let that sit. You can watch the status messages down here as it's going through this process. You can also view your Hyper-V manager, by the way, and you'll see it go into a backup state for a few minutes. It's creating the checkpoint that Unitrends is going to use to copy off to this machine. All right, so here you can see it's running through its backup process right now. It's creating that snapshot. Now it's started to copy that backup to the Unitrends appliance. That same process we described in the actual module for Hyper-V backups. All right, so you can see that action on the back side. You don't have to watch that, by the way. Just kind of a quick note on the back side. You can see this is copying data about 19 megs a second. The only job in the queue right now. Shouldn't take very long to run. We'll just go ahead and keep an eye on it as we're running it. All right, so we can see our Hyper-V backup is done. It's disappeared from our job manager, our active jobs queue here. And once again, you can go over to recent jobs in here, and you should be able to, see that it's sorted by the started date, and that's the top job on the list right here. You can click on it and view the log details if you need to kind of check out any of the details, or maybe it gave a warning or a failure, and you might need to go in and see why it failed. Now, one thing I want to talk about in this demo for you for Hyper-V as well before I leave you, and show you kind of the verification of this backup, is you'll see that Hyper-V uses a CBT filter driver, right, to track the change block tracking. Now, if you go to the Hyper-V server in here, and there's a knowledge base article on Unitrends for this as well too, but if you go to the Hyper-V host that you installed the Unitrends agent on, and you look under the C drive, under the PCBP folder, there's a directory in here called Win 2012 DIR. And under that directory, there's a directory here for our release date, which is 12/4/2015. And in that directory, there's an install.bat file right here. The knowledge base article has you run that installer, that .bat, right? And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and run. And you can see I've already got it in my run command here. But I'm going to put in the /i at the end for a flag install to install the CBT driver on this machine. Now, before I do that, I'm actually going to go out here to a command prompt, and we'll change directory and go to that location real quick. Okay, so here you can see I'm in the directory, and here you can see the install.bat. And if I run the install.bat and you run it, you can see that it requires you to put a flag in here for optional install or uninstall, right? And what I want to go ahead and do first is I'm going to go ahead and actually uninstall this. And we're going to uninstall the CBT driver. Now, what you'll notice from inside of here is if I go and try to run another job against this machine, it is going to fail, saying that the CBT driver is not installed and that you have to install the CBT driver. It gives you that warning in the error message. It's still technically a good backup, but it has to snapshot the entire disk again, so it might take a little bit longer than normal and be a little bit larger than normal if you see the CBT warning issues. We'll go ahead and let this job run. Once again, it's over here in our active queue. I can view the details of this job. It is now running an incremental backup once again because it already has a full in the system. Its next scheduled backup was an incremental. So that job will go ahead and kick off here. We'll go ahead and wait for that to run. Here you can see the job has already failed once again right away. You can see here the last time it ran, 9:25 at night. It's going to run at 1 o'clock again this morning. And if you look at your recent jobs up here, you can see that this says that it was successful already. So if you view the logs of it in here, you can see that the CBT driver load was successful even though we uninstalled that. So I'm not sure how that still was successful if we uninstalled that driver. Maybe because there was no changes and it was too quick. All right, so we might want to take a look at that. But anyways, that's a real good call out on how to uninstall and install it. I thought for sure that would fail the backup here. But if you rerun the installation here, it does go back through and reinstall the CBT driver for you. So if you do see that warning in there, that's the action it's having you take, is to rerun that installer with the flash or the /i, the flag for install, to install that CBT driver. Okay. Now in here, now that I've got some successful backups though, you can do a couple of different things. Once again, you can look at your dashboard, and once again, you won't see this reflect right away. If the backup just finished up, you may have to click the refresh wheel up here at the top. Then you kind of have to run your report, and you'll see down here now, if you sort it by protected and you pull the trues to the top, you now have a CentOS Hyper-V guest in here that does have a complete protected full in its system. If you look down in the backup section here now, the Hyper-V guest is also part of this backup schedule. You can see it has had 2 successful backups now, a full and an incremental. And you can also see that it's part of the Hyper-V 24-hour weekday incremental forever schedule in here in the next job details. Now you can also see it under the Protect tab. Once again, if you highlight on the appliance in the Protect tab and you filter on successes for today, you now see the CentOS client in here. Once again, it's alongside of our agent-based backups. This is the asset name. Even though it's a virtual machine, it looks the same in this view. You can also filter it at the bottom by part of its OS name or the machine name. You can also drop down into the Hyper-V environment here. And if you have multiple snapshots for this guest or for this environment, you would also see those filtered out inside of this portion as well too. There's all my guests on my Hyper-V host. I only have snapshots for the CentOS as well. All right, so I see that in that report. Now you can also go to your Recover section, go to the Backup Catalog, and you see the new Hyper-V virtual snapshot in here as part of the catalog. Once again, you can filter on a part of that name, that guest name. If you also want to only look at a particular backup type, once again, you can filter on that backup type. Here is the newest full for my CentOS. The other thing you want to do, once again, is make sure that you're looking at your backup catalogs to verify that everything is inside of this machine as it should be. For Hyper-V, you have to mount this as a recovery point. Or you're going to run through a test and you're going to do VMware, or you're going to do a VM recovery of this machine. You can do a VM instant recovery through Hyper-V back to your Hyper-V environment. Once again, check the Hyper-V recovery module for more specifics and more detail on how to perform Hyper-V recoveries. Now you can also run your capacity report. Under the appliance, once again, you have a capacity report that starts to break down your initial full for every asset you have. Here you can see this last full for this CentOS is 65 gigs. You can see that largest machine we have so far. By far, this is a virtual asset, and you can tell because it shows the hypervisor over here. You can also run under the report section, under the backup section here, the backup history. Once again, make sure you go back in time far enough to see all the backups that you want to report on. Okay, here you can see the hypervisor snapshots here, 55 minutes, 65 gigs. This is our Hyper-V full for our CentOS. If you look here in customizing this, you can add the application name. You can see that this is a hypervisor. You can also add in the database name, which will show you the virtual asset name. That's how I can tell those are the CentOS backups that ran across that asset. Okay, you have to pull out a little bit more detail to be able to see that that's the virtual asset name in there. Once again, you can sort by elapsed time in here. You can still see that the CentOS got 65 gigs as the only backup job running. It did that in 55 minutes. Right? Didn't take half as long when I was running these agent-based backups in the same big group. So once again, if you do a bunch of VM guests in a same group, those backups may slow down as they run in concurrent connections together. Here we can see in the dashboard now, it has reflected those changes ever since I refreshed the dashboard here. You can now see I've got a little bit more growth now that I brought new machines on as well too. Still too soon to see any data reduction listed inside of here. I might see that later on tomorrow as we run a few more backups and some more time elapses. All right, so there's a pretty good overview of Hyper-V backups.